Obama's hair is looking grayer these days. Can't imagine why, since he doesn't seem to be one bit worried about all that's going on.
President Obama on Jimmy Kimmel Live with a humorous approach to Twitter attacks.
Self-deprecating humor, that's always fun. But actress Ashley Judd is not laughing about her latest harassment on Twitter, saying she will take action.
The amount of gender violence that I experience is absolutely extraordinary, and a significant part of my day today will be spent filing police reports at home about gender violence that's directed at me on social media.
Yeah, Judd's Twitter blew up with the hateful tweets after Judd, a huge supporter of the University of Kentucky, tweeted that Arkansas was playing dirty.
Well, March Madness continues, and that's a new kind of madness in social media. The question becomes, will this set a new precedent for online protections? Let's talk about it with our good friend, the right-thinking man who's the columnist and author of the Left Coast Report, James Hirsen. Good morning, Counselor. From your vantage point, does Ashley Judd have a case?
Well, anyone who is stalked or is harassed or has their privacy violated online potentially has a case, because statutes exist in virtually all the states that say that electronic communications can be harassment. The question is going to be, was it outrageous enough? Because we have a conflict here. You have a conflict between the free expression of the First Amendment and the idea of committing an outrageous act of harassment that either is civil or criminally creating legal liability. And so, like, for example, if someone repeatedly harassed her to the point where it seemed like they were cyber stalking, or if someone used incredibly outrageous language that would make her feel as though she was threatened physically, those would be the kinds of examples where it would create, both criminal and civil liability. It's not, because the First Amendment is there, it's never an easy burden of proof for the plaintiff. But I think she's taking a valiant stand simply because the cyber world, because of its anonymity, is a place where we lack civility. I mean, we have some of the most profane and ridiculous kinds of communications that occur. But on the other hand, if you enter the world of college sports and you start a dialogue, it's almost inevitable that there's going to be some rough language. So this is a balancing act.
James, Ashley Judd is not the only celebrity to take matters into their own hands. Recently, former MLB player Curt Schilling tracked down two men who harassed his teenage daughter on Twitter. One has been fired, and the other man faces disciplinary action from their jobs. So are we going to start seeing a new precedent when it comes to Twitter and social media? Where do you draw that line legally? Because with your
I think that's a really good example to contrast with Ashley Judd, because in the case of Curt Schilling's daughter, she's a minor, she's a teenager, she is more vulnerable as a young girl. And as I understand, the communications were particularly vile. They described acts of unconsented intimacy, which should never, ever be communicated to a young woman. And so Curt Schilling, and as a man, as a father, I understand his feelings, and I'm amazed at his self-restraint in the way he handled this. But I think that the precedent has already been set in a way, because there's been so many cases of people who have been either harassed on the internet or stalked that have come to the attention of the courts, and they're really catching up technologically, and the legislatures across this country. So I think that's a good thing. I think we have to some extent, impose a level of civility that doesn't make...
James, on that, you do contract law. You may have to set up a whole division for cyber law. Yeah. We're going to continue to talk about Hollywood and what's happening with James Hirsen right after this.
I don't think it serves anybody well not to go through deliberately the process that we have and make sure we do it right, and the right people are brought to justice, and anybody who's responsible for that kind of truly offensive behavior is punished, as they should be.
Penn State University President Eric Barron talking about how his university will handle a recent fraternity scandal. That scandal made national headlines after fraternity brothers allegedly posted sexually compromising pictures of women who had attended their parties on Facebook.
Yeah, the university has suspended the fraternity, but under Pennsylvania law, some members could face charges for what's called revenge porn. The new law makes it punishable for an ex to post sexually explicit pictures on the internet that were taken while the couple were together.
So the question is this: will fraternity members will their actions fall under this law? Let's continue our conversation with James Hirsen, the columnist who writes Left Coast Report for Newsmax, and of course is an attorney himself. If it's on the book in Pennsylvania, I guess it applies to these guys, does it not, James?
Yes, it does. I think the name is unfortunate. They use the term revenge porn, making it appear as though there's some sort of particular motive that is necessary. And that's not the way these statutes are written. They're written that if, in fact, the sexually explicit material or photo is shared online without the individual's consent, the individual who's pictured in the photo, then that, in fact, makes it subject to the statute and a crime. And so this is an education problem here because, fraternities are notorious for having their parties and for engaging in outrageous behavior and all that. But it seems obvious to me, and from the public statements of this fraternity, that they do not understand this basic concept that you do not post intimate pictures of an individual without their consent. And we have to, educate the public to that. And it seems like it would be common sense, but unfortunately, at a frat party where they're using bongs to drink beer, common sense goes out the window.
So what do you think is going to happen to these guys?
Well, initially, I think there's been some suspensions, and I think it's possible that they'll be brought into the criminal justice system, and those that don't have any record will probably be given some sort of probation and the ability to serve out the probation and charged with misdemeanors. But I think that they almost have to act because of the fact that there's been so much publicity and public spotlight on the case.
Hey, James, we got about a minute and a half remaining, and this is something that may be going on in Hollywood. We're hearing that some celebrities and stars are throwing away their smartphones, going back to the lower tech flip phones. That may look like Star Trek communicators, but have you heard about that? The return of the old-fashioned flip cell phone?
Yeah, it shows the mindless trends that occur because Anna Wintour was seen holding a flip phone. Well, everyone else has to be seen holding a flip phone, and now it's trendy. Basically, what these celebrities are doing is saying, I am too ignorant to be able to control the preferences of my smartphone and make them private. So therefore, I have to go to primitive technology. Next thing you know, they'll be carrying those brick phones or carrying around a phone with a line attached or maybe a can with a string. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious to me that people would be celebrating this technology. And I read that Senator Chuck Schumer had ordered a huge batch of these flip phones. He loves them so much. I guess, so I hope he's not involved in any legislation involving technology.
Well, they may have votes on some. I remember my days in the House, we had those kind of votes, but to be fair about it, my technological prowess with smartphones is lacking for purposes of full disclosure. A man who knows pop culture, politics, the law, and what's happening in Hollywood, our good friend James Hirsen. James, thanks so much. After the break, Ben Coley will be here, talk about his new movie, Cracker Jack. Grab some popcorn. We're coming back.